when it comes in contact with audible? Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, okay. The intrinsic pathway is activation by contact. So factor 12 is activated, which activates factor 11 from inactivated to activated form. In turn, then 9 is activated. Factor 9 is activated. Once it is activated in association with factor 8, it activates factor 10. So again it comes to the common pathway. So till then there are two pathways, extrinsic and intrinsic. They meet at the common pathway, which starts from the activated factor 10. So activated factor 10 in association with factor 5, which is activated, and calcium converts prothrombin, which is factor 2, to thrombin, that is 2A. All the factors with A is activated and plain is inactivated. So prothrombin is factor 2, and it is converted into active form thrombin, that is thrombin, by activated factor 10, which is the main pathway. Then in turn the thrombin acts on fibrinogen and converts it into fibrin, which polymerizes and stabilizes into a clot. This is the mechanism of formation of the clot, where all the factors come into play, and the main is prothrombin to thrombin, and thrombin converts fibrinogen to fibrin. So usually the extrinsic pathway is monitored by thrombin time, whereas intrinsic pathway is monitored by the activated partial thromboplastin time. This you know very well from your pathology. So it is just a revision. So coming to the topic proper, it is the anticoagulants. So they are classified for practical purpose and therapeutic purpose, parenteral anticoagulants and oral anticoagulants. So if you are taking up the parenteral anticoagulants, it has two components based on the mechanism of action of the drugs. One is group of drugs which acts on the thrombin. So they are called indirect thrombin inhibitors. The groups of drugs that comes under indirect thrombin inhibitors are heparin. They are unfractionated. Then low molecular weight heparin. There are many names like enoxaparin, reviparin, nadoparin, deltaparin. So all these are low molecular weight heparins. And then fondaparinux. It is again a heparin derivative with fewer advantages over the basic unfractionated heparin. Initially, only heparin unfractionated was used. Of late, after the arrival of low molecular weight heparin, for a majority of advantages, it is being used. So, parenteral anticoagulant with the mechanism of action being the thrombin, it is called indirect thrombin inhibitors. Then coming to the direct thrombin inhibitor, they constitute hirudin groups. That is bivalirudin and argotroban. These are all the two direct thrombin inhibitors that are used parenterally, and indications I will be telling late. Whereas other group of oral anticoagulants that has three divisions. One is vitamin K antagonist, that is dicumarol group. That is warfarin comes under this group of vitamin K antagonist or dicumarol group. The other second is direct factor 10A inhibitor. 10A comes in the common pathway. So that is being inhibited. So direct factor 10A inhibitor, that are the rivaroxaban and apixaban. Two drugs are under direct factor 10A inhibitor. Then the third group is oral direct thrombin inhibitor. That is dabigatran. The drug which is used as of now is dabigatran. So, under oral anticoagulant, the old one is vitamin K antagonist, that is warfarin, which is dicumarol group. Whereas newer drugs are direct 10A inhibitor and direct thrombin inhibitor. Direct 10A inhibitor is rivaroxaban and apixaban, and direct thrombin inhibitor oral is dabigatran. This is the major classification. So just for revision, it is parenteral and oral under parenteral two divisions, indirect thrombin inhibitor, under which heparin, low molecular weight heparin, fondaparin X comes, whereas parenteral anticoagulation category 2 is direct thrombin inhibitors, where bivalirudin and argatroban are the drugs. Coming to the oral anticoagulants, 3 vitamin A, vitamin K antagonist, direct factor 10A inhibitor, and direct thrombin inhibitor. So, taking the individual drugs into account, because it is a therapeutic class, so we will take first heparin. The mechanism of action of heparin as an anticoagulant is by activating antithrombin. So, the activation of antithrombin is accelerated by heparin, which in turn inhibits thrombin and factor 10A. So, thereby the clotting mechanism is interrupted. So, it has a pentasaccharide sequence by which it acts. So, once antithrombin combines with heparin, so it is deactivated and the process is a continuous one, getting fixed with antithrombin again, deactivated by that. So, it repeatedly goes and the mechanism of action is accelerated of antithrombin is activated. Thereby, it inhibits factor 10A. So, it has fast action also, and short period it will be ending also. So, the heparin acts based on the amount of dose that is given, and so that if it is a lower dose, frequency should be more. If it is a higher dose, the frequency can be increased. So, if you are taking 5,000 units as a dose, then it should be every 6th hour. Or if it is taken as 10,000, it can be given twice and all. So, that way heparin acts. So, actually unfractionated heparin combines with antithrombin and acts by inhibiting factor 10A and thrombin. That is the basic mechanism of action by which heparin acts. So, heparin is in the form of injections. So, it should be given either as subcutaneous injection or IV, never as IM. Okay. So, for therapeutic use, IV route is employed at lower doses, and half-life, as I told, is very short. So, and it binds rapidly with the endothelium. With higher doses, the half-life is longer and cleared more slowly, and after getting saturated with endothelium, and the clearance is by the renal mechanism, and dose dependence also. So, the half-life of heparin ranges from 30 minutes to 60 minutes with bolus IV doses. So, clearance is also extra-renal. So, when coming to the limitations of heparin, so it poor availability at low doses because it binds to the endothelial cells and macrophages. So, the dose, if it is high with a lesser frequency, if it is low, then it should be of more frequent nature. Then dose dependent clearance. So, because it binds with macrophages, and it has variable anticoagulant response because of the binding nature of plasma protein. So, if the plasma protein is altered, then the anticoagulant property will be also affected. So, it varies from patient to patient depending upon the bondage with the plasma proteins. Then its activity is reduced in the already formed thrombi. It will not act on the already formed thrombi, or which are platelet rich, because it is neutralized by the platelet factor 4, which are released by the activated platelets. Once there is a clotting mechanism, even platelets are activated and releases platelet factor 4. So, that is neutralized by heparin. So, this is the mechanism and limitations of the heparin. So, how you will monitor the anticoagulant effect of heparin? It is by monitoring or measuring the activated partial thromboplastin time and anti-factor 10A level. By this way, you can assess the that is the heparin action. So, what are all the common adverse effects that see with injection? heparin. So the risk of bleeding is more with heparin also. When it is concomitantly administered with antiplatelets or fibrinolytes. Antiplatelets are aspirin, clopidogrel, and other things, and fibrinolytic agents. In case of acute MI, coronary syndromes, they'll be using fibrinolytics like streptokinase, urokinase, tenecteplase, and the patient may be on even antiplatelets already for prophylaxis or a preventive measure. So in that case, when there is co-administration of heparin, the chances of bleeding is more, which should be kept in mind. And if heparin is administered for more than a month, then there is a chance of reduction in bone density. So they are prone for osteoporosis, and pathological fracture like vertebral fractures are quite common on chronic heparin administration. So other side effect is, one is bleeding I told, the other is the osteoporosis on chronic usage, and there is an entity called heparin induced thrombocytopenia, which is an immunological mechanism. So the activated platelets releases PF4, which binds with the heparin, and in association with IgG, immune complex is formed, which occupies the FC receptor of IgG, and the platelet is removed by the splenic macrophages. So there is relative thrombocytopenia. By the same time, after combining with FC receptor of IgG, platelets are activated and release is also there, aggregation and thrombosis. So both thrombocytopenia and thrombosis occurs with heparin induced thrombocytopenia. So this can be asked as a short notes. What are all the typical features of heparin induced thrombocytopenia? Thrombocytopenia, that is platelet count less than 1.5 lakhs, or decrease in platelet count more than 50%, which was there with the patient originally. Then timing, usually the platelet count starts falling by 4th day after heparin administration, and up to 10 days it can present lately. So common timing is 4th day to 10th day of administration. So there will be both thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. So you have to carefully watch and stop heparin instantly. So, but if you still want to treat the patient with anticoagulant, then the better drug is low molecular weight heparin. So it is quite common with malignant patients, malignancy, those who are having malignancy with thrombosis potential, and it is more common with women than men. So venous thrombosis is more common than the arterial thrombosis along with thrombocytopenia. So how do you manage? Stop the heparin and go for alternative anticoagulant like oral or direct thrombin inhibitors like rivaroxaban, apixaban, or argatroban, etc. No need of platelet transfusions even though there is thrombocytopenia. And warfarin, if the patient is on, it has to be stopped till the INR is normalized, and evaluate for thrombosis, and if necessary prefer other group of anticoagulants once the patient has got hit, that is heparin induced thrombocytopenia. HITT is heparin induced thrombocytopenia and thrombocytosis. So coming to the low molecular weight heparin, the second group of drug in indirect thrombin inhibitor. So heparin's molecular weight is 15,000, whereas low molecular weight heparin, it is around 5,000, whereas fondaparinux, it is only 1,500. So based on that, the clearance will be less. Okay, heparin clearance will be fast, low molecular weight heparin less, fondaparinux still less. So the cumulative effect will be there. So it can be given twice a day or once a day. So it has longer duration of action. So smaller fragments of heparin, which is enzymatically or chemically depolymerized from heparin. It is a derivative. Okay. So mechanism is similar to that by activation of antithrombin, similar to heparin. So again the adverse effect, bleeding, which is very common unless there is associated antiplatelets or fibrinolytics, it is very rare. But if the patient is already on antiplatelets and on fibrinolysis, you should be little cautious in administering low molecular weight heparin, monitor bleeding tendencies. Then the risk of hit, similar to that, it is very less, 1 in 10. If with heparin, if it is 1, then with low molecular weight heparin, 1 in 10 only will get it, because it has less affinity with the platelet factor 4. And again, osteoporosis is less common with low molecular weight heparin. Because of these advantages, nowadays low molecular weight heparin is preferred over heparin. But the disadvantage is cost. Cost, it will be little costlier. So when compared to the low molecular weight heparin over heparin, what are all the advantages? Because with low molecular weight heparin, the bioavailability and longer duration of action, and it is injection in the form of subcutaneous. So the dose can be once or twice daily. So it is a simplified dosing, and you need not monitor PTT, which is usually warranted every 6th hourly with respect to heparin. And there is low risk of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia and low risk of osteoporosis. So it is safer than heparin for prolonged administration. Okay. So fondaparinux, again, it is similar to heparin, which has a pentasaccharide sequence, and again it acts through antithrombin. So the drug is given subcutaneously once daily. So it is cleared unchanged via renal. So when the creatinine clearance is less than 30 ml per minute, fondaparinux is contraindicated. So it does not cause hit because it doesn't bind to platelet factor 4. So adverse effect, bleeding, which is little rare. So all these comes under heparin, low molecular weight heparin, fondaparinux, indirect thrombin inhibitors. Okay. Coming to the direct thrombin inhibitors of parenteral origin, it is the lepirudin and desirudin. These are all the drugs that are available, and it binds directly to the thrombin. That is why it is called as direct thrombin inhibitors. So directly it enters and blocks and the coagulation cascade. Argatroban and bivalirudin or other drugs. So it is monitored by APTT. So when you are taking argatroban, it is an univalent inhibitor and metabolized in the liver, so very safe in renal failure. Whereas bivalirudin, it is a divalent thrombin inhibitor and half-life of 25 minutes, shortest half-life. Okay, so it can be given subcutaneously just prior to percutaneous intervention. It is an alternate to heparin because of short half-life. So if you want to reverse it back also, it is easy. So it is used by the cardiologist for percutaneous intervention procedures. So where parenteral drugs are indicated, what are all the situations where you will use these parenteral drugs? One is active venous thrombosis. It may be either deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, cortical vein thrombosis in the brain, both for treatment and for prophylaxis it is of use. Then coming to the second category, acute coronary syndrome. It is used with percutaneous interventions, STEMI, acute ST elevation MI, it is of use, and even in unstable angina, these drugs are used as an anticoagulant. And even it is used to maintain the catheter patency, arterial and venous lines. They should not be getting clotted. So for that also it is used to make the catheter patent for longer time, especially in hemodialysis and for intravenous access. At times in few patients it is established for chemotherapy, for adenosine administrations and all those things where central line is preferred just to avoid the clots. These are all the drugs that can be used. Okay, where it is contraindicated, all these groups. Absolute contraindication, especially when the patient has bleeding disorders, you should be very careful. And with a history of prior heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, you should not be giving it. When there is a recent ocular or neurosurgery, it should not be given. And when the patient needs lumbar puncture, again it should be avoided. And it should be avoided in chronic alcoholism, cirrhosis with coagulopathy. It is absolutely not indicated. It is contraindicated. Relative contraindication, severe hypertension, because it can make hemorrhage in the cerebrum, brain. So with severe hypertension, you should not administer. And active GI ulcers, active gastric ulcer or duodenal ulcer, there is a tendency for bleed. So it has to be given with caution, or it is a relative contraindication. And when there is a subbacterial endocarditis and there are vegetations which are potential to get embolized, then also it is not indicated. So in that situation, aspirin should be used. So coming to the oral anticoagulants, the first and old medication is warfarin. Still we are using. It is cheaper and available. So it is water soluble vitamin K antagonist and used orally. So it interferes with the synthesis of vitamin K dependent clotting factors 2, 5, 7, 9 and 10. These are all vitamin K dependent factors. And again, vitamin K dependent anticoagulant proteins, protein C and protein C, yes, also will be interfered by the action of warfarin. So it acts by inhibiting the vitamin K reductase, and the vitamin K dependent factors are inhibited, and there is promotion of the mechanism of anticoagulation is executed. So how it is being monitored? So warfarin administration is monitored with prothrombin time, that is PT, with INR, international Lyse ratio. So the target INR should be, in a case of thrombosis, it should be 2 to 3 times. When the patient is having mechanical valve after some valve surgeries, then the INR should be maintained at 2.5 to 3.5. So when the INR goes beyond 4.5, there will be a risk of intracranial hemorrhage or bleeding anywhere. So you should be monitoring prothrombin time when you are starting warfarin in any patient. So actually warfarin, it takes longer, 2 to 3 days to act plasma level. So it is always used as a bridge therapy. So the patient is started with heparin and then it is bridged with warfarin, and after 2 to 3 days heparin is stopped and warfarin maintained and being monitored with prothrombin time. So the adverse effects of warfarin is bleeding skin necrosis. Usually few patients can develop warfarin necrosis, erythematous lesions in the thighs and toes with a central lesion progressing to necrosis. This is because of the action on protein C and protein S, which are inhibited. So there is skin necrosis. Again, in pregnancy, warfarin should not be used as it crosses the placenta and causes fetal abnormalities and bleeding to the fetus also. So once the patient is already on warfarin, when they are planning for pregnancy, you should switch over to low molecular weight heparin or heparin. Strictly for the initial 3 months, the patient should not be given with warfarin. Otherwise, warfarin embryopathy, that is, the child will be having nasal hypoplasia and stippled epiphysis. So you have to start heparin throughout and continue heparin throughout pregnancy, and after delivery, warfarin can be initiated accordingly if the patient needs a lifelong anticoagulant. So other oral anticoagulants which I told was direct thrombin inhibitors and factor 10A inhibitors. Factor 10A inhibitor is rivaroxaban. It is the drug. There is no prodrug and bioavailability is around 80% and dosing is twice a day. Half life is around 7 to 11 hours and renal excretion is around 66%. If you're taking apixaban, it is again the target mechanism of action is based on factor 10A and bioavailability is 60%. Dosing is twice a day, 12th early, and renal excretion 25%. So the third thing is dabigatran, which acts on thrombin, direct thrombin inhibitor, oral anticoagulant. NOAC they say, newer, N for new, O for oral anticoagulants. NOAC they say in the short form, newer oral anticoagulants. So they are rivaroxaban, apixaban, dabigatran. Dabigatran, it acts through thrombin, direct thrombin inhibitor. Bioavailability is 6%. The dose is twice a day and renal excretion is around 80%. So advantages of newer oral anticoagulants are rapid onset and rapid offset and short half-life. And there is no need of lab monitoring. So fixed dose guidelines are there. So on the anti-thrombotic efficacy is equal to warfarin and side effects of warfarin is not going to be there. And the risk of bleeding is very minimum and even drug to drug interactions are very minimal. So these are all the advantages and it can be taken orally. So these are all the advantages of newer oral anticoagulants. And monitoring can be done with prothrombin time and APTT for dabigatran. So where these anticoagulants, as such I have covered all the anticoagulants, parenteral, oral, parenteral indirect thrombin inhibitor and direct thrombin inhibitor, oral vitamin K antagonist, then drugs acting on factor 10A and direct thrombin inhibitor. So totally there are 5 groups of anticoagulants, parenteral and oral all together. So where these anticoagulants are indicated. So venous thrombosis, either it can be active thrombosis or to prevent venous thrombosis like prolonged bedridden patients, they are prone for deep vein thrombosis. So as a prophylaxis also you can give. And as a treatment, once there is thrombus formation and extension and going on to pulmonary embolism, also it is being treated with anticoagulants. One is venous thrombosis. Then the other category is stroke. It is acute cerebrovascular accident. When there is systemic embolization associated with atrial fibrillation, it can be valvular heart disease or lone atrial fibrillation or atrial fibrillation due to hypertension or dilated cardiomyopathy, whatever it may be, atrial fibrillation with embolic complications. It is of use both prophylactically and therapeutically. And then post cardiac valve replacement. So when the patient is given prosthetic valve, where again it is of use for prophylaxis and treatment towards thromboembolism. So in rheumatic valvular heart disease, when the atrial dimension is more than 55 millimeter or there is evidence of LA thrombus or previous systemic embolization and conditions like anti-phospholipid antibody syndrome, these are all used anticoagulants, heparin or low molecular weight heparin, depending upon the patient's affordability and other comorbid conditions we tend to give. So how to treat the complications? Already I have told, bleeding due to heparin. If the bleeding is due to heparin, the specific antidote is protamine sulfate. So it is 1 milligram of protamine sulfate will neutralize 100 units of heparin. So how much heparin the patient has got Based on that, you should be calculating the dose of protamine sulfate, and it has to be given if there is a profuse bleeding. Because the short half-life of heparin is short, usually it will be limited quite early. But if it is very gross, then you should be giving the maximum dose. Maybe if you don't know exactly the dose, then maximum dose is 50 milligrams of protamine. With protamine, the reactions are either hypotension or bradycardia. So you have to be very careful and administer very slowly, not more than 5 milligram per minute. Within a minute, only 5 grams should go in. So the rate of infusion should be slow to avoid hypotension and bradycardia. And again, if the patient is allergic to protamine, then it should not be used. Then for treating warfarin induced skin necrosis, so you reverse it with vitamin K because it is a vitamin K antagonist. And because there is protein C and S deficiency, FFP can be given to treat warfarin induced necrosis, or prothrombin complex concentrate will be of use to treat warfarin induced. If there is warfarin induced bleed, if the INR is more than 3.5 or more than 4.5, the risk of bleeding is more. In that case, use IV vitamin K or prothrombin complex concentrates or FFP. Whichever is available, you have to use. If the INR is 3.5 to 10, but the patient is asymptomatic, then withhold warfarin until INR comes to the desired level, like 2 to 2.5 with respect to heart disease, that is prosthetic valve. So till it normalizes, you wait and then restart with small dose and achieve the desired INR. If it is more than 10, again asymptomatic, you have to treat withheld warfarin and initiate oral vitamin K, either 2.5 to 5 milligrams. This is how you are going to treat the complications that are produced by the anticoagulants. So I have covered what are all anticoagulants, that is in the therapeutics, how you are going to use parenteral or oral. Then so various diseases where it is being used and complications of those drugs. Okay. Any doubts, you can go through Hutchinson and clarify. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.